in the far reaches of the San Juan Canyonlands, where red dust drifted like ghosts over sun-baked stone, and the wind moaned like it remembered better days, there lived a woman whose eyes had long since turned to shadow. Martha Kincaid, once the proud wife of a frontier scout, now walked her days by memory and sound, her sight stolen years ago by fever. But she did not stumble. She moved with the careful grace of someone who had no choice but to remember every tree root and stone by footfall alone. The cabin stood at the canyon's bend, where water cut through the rocks in a narrow stream. It was a humble place, patched with care and time, timbers weathered gray, roof tarred and retarred. Inside, everything had its place, and everything stayed there. Martha had learned long ago that vision was a poor substitute for order. Each morning she sat on the porch with her husband's old guitar across her lap, fingers working the strings until they gave her music. She sang to the land, not because anyone might hear, but because the canyon walls carried sound like it was sacred, and in the echoes, she felt less alone. But someone was listening. They'd been watching her for days. 3 men on horseback, the Burns brothers. Their father had taught them to take what they wanted and leave no witnesses. They weren't after her songs or kindness. They were after something they believed lay buried beneath her feet. Gold, they said, hidden in the rock by Union scouts long ago. Some drunken claim told around a fire in a saloon up north had led them here. And what better way to shake truth from a widow than fire? That night, when the sun sank behind the mesas and the stars blinked out one by one under cloud cover, they came. Martha was stirring a pot of rabbit stew by the hearth, humming an old ballad, when she caught the smell, not stew, not wood smoke, oil. Her body froze, every sense straining. She reached for the walking stick beside the hearth, heart knocking against her ribs like a trapped bird. Then came the crack, wood splitting, fire leaping, the rush of wind feeding flame. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She moved. The back door burst open before the front collapsed. Smoke curled low, thick and mean, and the heat licked at her face as she stumbled through the threshold. She knew the path, 12 steps to the tool post. Turn right, downhill toward the creek. Her stick burned her hand before she tossed it. Sparks clung to her dress like burrs. Behind her, the cabin groaned and hissed, the roof giving way in a thunderclap of flame and timber. Her lungs filled with ash, but still she moved, barefoot, the ground cutting her with every step. Somewhere far off, one of the brothers laughed. Let her run. The blind don't get far. She dropped to her knees beside the creek, breathing hard, fingers trembling in the cold water. Her ears rang. Her skin burned, but her lips began to move, and her voice came soft at first, then stronger. She sang. Not for them. Not for mercy. She sang the ballad of James Kincaid, the scout who never left a man behind. She sang of hills and ghosts and canyons that swallowed evil whole. She sang to remember that she was still here. The men behind her hesitated. One of them muttered that she sounded like a banshee. Another cursed and kicked his horse, circling wide, uncertain if what he heard was woman or witch. Martha didn't wait to find out. She rose to her feet, turned her face toward the ridges, and walked. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stop. Her voice guided her more than her feet. Her blood left a trail, but the dark knew her. She sang into it, and somewhere miles away, a man on horseback paused. He was a shadow against the night, rifle slung low, eyes sharp as shattered glass. He tilted his head, listening. The melody drifted on the wind, high and strange, like sorrow wrapped in strength. Not a bird, not a coyote, a woman, singing. The scout turned his horse, and the canyon listened. The song carried through the canyon like smoke, thin at first, then thick with sorrow. Elias Crow reined in his mare near the ridge's edge, one hand resting on the smooth butt of his rifle, the other wrapped loosely around the reins. He'd heard 1,000 sounds from these lands, coyotes yipping, owls calling, the rustle of rabbits through sage, but this was no animal. This was human and haunting. He'd ridden alone for weeks, tracking a trail most men couldn't see, led by signs only someone like him would notice. A horseshoe nail left behind in red dust, the heat of a campfire buried under brush, the smell of gun oil lingering in air gone still. The Burns brothers weren't ghosts, but they left ghosts behind them. A stagecoach robbery outside Durango. A burned ranch near Santa Fe. Then whispers of a blind woman living alone in the canyon. Whispers followed by silence. Elias had known this land since childhood, long before he wore the scout's coat for the Union Army, back when his Apache mother taught him how to track birds by their silence and find water with his eyes closed. He trusted the wind more than he trusted men, and the wind was uneasy tonight. The singing stopped. That was worse than hearing it. He slid from the saddle, crouched low, and touched the earth. Warm. Fire had passed through here recently. Char in the air. He led the mare by hand down a deer trail until he found boot tracks, small and uneven, weaving through underbrush like someone fleeing with no guide but instinct. No doubt in his mind now. Whoever had been singing was hurt, and not far. He followed the trail to a hollow near the stream, where shadows folded thick, and there she was. Martha Kincaid. He hadn't seen her in years, but he knew that face, sun-marked skin, high cheekbones, and the firm line of her jaw. She was thinner now, barefoot, blood crusting her ankles, dress torn from briars. Her eyes stared at nothing, though she sat upright on a flat stone, lips parted as if caught mid-song. Her hand trembled on the body of a scorched guitar she'd somehow carried with her, the strings broken but clutched like a lifeline. Elias stayed still. A good scout knew when silence was wiser than greeting. He watched her breathe, shallow, ragged. Her body swayed slightly, and her fingers reached toward the sound of the stream, like a child unsure of the dark. "You're not one of them," she said suddenly. Elias stiffened. Her voice was low, calm, but her words struck true. "How do you know?" he asked, stepping into view. "Because they would have let me die." She turned her head toward him, not seeing, but knowing. He knelt before her and gently reached for her wrist. Her pulse was weak, her skin hot with fever. "You're hurt," he said. "Not dead. That's more than they planned for." "I saw the smoke," he murmured. "They burned your home." "They thought I had gold," she said, lips curling with dry humor. "All I had was my husband's guitar, and they nearly took that too." He untied his canteen and pressed it to her lips. She drank slowly, then sighed, as if the water had cooled something more than her throat. Elias wrapped a rough-spun blanket around her shoulders, pulled from his saddlebag. She flinched when he touched her, but didn't resist. "Name's Elias Crow," he said. "I remember," she replied, surprising him. "James spoke of you." Elias's jaw tightened. He was a good man. He was better than good. He left me this land because he said it was the last place he felt peace. She tilted her head. "Did you come for the brothers?" "I've been following them since they crossed into New Mexico. Thought they'd head for Mexico. Didn't expect them to linger here. They expected I'd lead them to something," she said. "But the only treasure buried here is my memories." Elias looked past her, to the black line of smoke still smudging the stars in the distance. "They'll come back when they realize the fire didn't finish you. They'll find a different woman waiting," she said, voice cool. Elias studied her for a long moment. Her blindness was undeniable, but so was her calm. There was steel beneath the ash. Most would have broken after what she'd survived. She hadn't. "We can ride for town," he offered. "There's a doctor in Piedra. Sheriff, too." She shook her head. "No town. Not yet. You want revenge. I want them to understand the pain they tried to leave behind. And I want them to feel it when they're looking straight into nothing but the dark." He nodded slowly, not in agreement, but understanding. This wasn't about bloodlust. It was about closure. Frontier justice didn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wore old boots and a broken voice. "They're camped near the old mine shaft," Elias said. 2 miles north. I found their trail this morning. They've gone quiet, likely waiting to see if you crawl back." "I won't," she whispered. "I'll sing." Elias raised a brow. "My voice saved me," she said, reaching once more for her ruined guitar. "It may just finish them." He stood, moved to the saddlebag again, and returned with a small pouch. From it, he drew salve for her cuts and a tin of smoked jerky. She took both without comment. Her hands were steady now. "You were always good at watching from the dark," she said. "That's how I stayed alive. That's how we'll both stay alive." The wind shifted, bringing with it the dry taste of smoke and the scent of horses. Elias glanced up, eyes narrowing. "They're still close," he said. "I know," she replied, leaning back against the stone, voice low, tired but resolute. "Let them come." For the first time since he'd arrived, Elias smiled, just slightly. He sat beside her, rifle laid across his knees, and listened as she began to hum once more. A different song now. Slower, sadder, a warning. And the canyon listened again. Dawn broke quiet and blood orange over the ridges, casting long, skeletal shadows through the canyon floor. The land was waking, but it did not stretch or yawn. It held its breath. Elias and Martha moved before the sun could fully rise. He helped her onto the mare, patting the saddle with his blanket. She clung not with fear, but with muscle memory. Her hands curled around the saddle horn like they belonged there. Her blindfold was gone, her face exposed to the wind, to the dust, to the truth of what she was about to do. They didn't speak as they rode. The trail narrowed as they approached the old mine shaft, a gaping wound in the cliff face, long abandoned by miners who struck only shale and disappointment. The Burns brothers had chosen the place well, hidden from above, defensible, with only two ways in. But Elias had scouted it during the war and knew a third, a narrow ledge just wide enough for a sure-footed man with a rifle and a good aim. He left her 200 yards from the camp, beneath a rock overhang that echoed her voice perfectly. She dismounted on her own, hands sweeping the ground around her. She found her place, legs folded beneath her, the guitar, repaired with rawhide and stubbornness, resting on her lap. The firelight from the brothers' camp flickered faintly in the distance, orange specks in the gray gloom. Elias climbed the ridge in silence, rifle slung behind him, a revolver at his side. His moccasins made no sound. Every step was measured, every breath low. He reached the outcropping and went prone, watching. There they were, 3 figures huddled near the coals, guns stacked casually against a log, one brother asleep, the other 2 chewing dry meat and spitting into the fire. They weren't expecting company. Certainly not from a blind woman who had walked barefoot through smoke and night and lived to sing about it. Then her voice rose, soft at first, like wind curling through grass. One of the brothers stiffened, sat straighter. The other cursed, glancing into the dark. "She's dead," he muttered. "We burned her. You saw it. She's singing less. She ain't dead." Elias watched through the scope. No sudden moves. Let the fear fester. Let the ghost story take root. Martha's song was different now. Less of a ballad, more like a hymn. Each verse wrapped the canyon in something old and aching. The kind of tune that didn't just call to memory, but dragged it from the earth, like a buried body. The brother called Les stood, pacing now, gun in hand. "Shut up," he snapped at the air, though no one had spoken. "She's close," muttered the third. "Maybe she crawled back. Maybe she's crazy. Maybe she's cursed," Les said, voice cracking. The fire popped. Martha's voice didn't waver. She sang of men who thought fire could erase truth, of mothers who outlived sons, of songs that outlasted bullets. Her fingers danced across the strings like they were born there. Then Elias moved. 2 shots, quiet as thunder from behind cotton. One brother fell forward into the embers. The second reached for his rifle, only to find Elias already sliding down the rock with the sure grace of a hawk in dive. The third, the one called Les, turned to run but slipped on the shale, landing hard, blood streaking his temple from the fall. Elias was on him in 2 strides. "You remember the woman you left to burn?" he asked. Les blinked, dazed, nose bleeding, mouth slack. "She was blind," he gasped. "How she ain't supposed to be alive?" "She's more alive than you'll ever be." Les lunged, fist swinging wild. Elias stepped aside, caught his arm, and drove the butt of his revolver into the man's gut, then his jaw. Les dropped with a groan, curling like a child in the dirt. Martha's song ended. Silence followed, thicker than smoke. Elias dragged Les to the center of the camp and tied his hands behind his back with saddle rope. The other 2 were still, one dead, the other unconscious, maybe dying. Justice didn't always give time to pray. He walked back to Martha. She turned her head as he approached. "All done?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "They heard your voice. They heard what they feared most, truth without apology." Elias helped her to her feet. She didn't smile, but her chin lifted. "What now?" he asked. "We ride for the sheriff. Leave the dead to the crows." "And you?" "I return to what's left of home. There's nothing left standing." She paused. "The land still remembers, and I remember it." He looked toward the rising sun, then back at her. There was something vast in her stillness, like stone that refused to crumble. They mounted together. The wind picked up again, sweeping through the canyon like a sigh. Behind them, the fire smoldered to ash. Ahead, the trail waited. They reached Piedra by dusk, with the last of the blood-orange light clinging to the rooftops. Dust from the trail clung to their boots, their faces, their silence. Elias rode ahead, Martha behind him, sitting straight though every muscle in her body screamed for rest. No one in the streets recognized her at first, not as the woman they believed had died when the Burns brothers torched her cabin in the canyon. But recognition came slowly, like light blooming through clouds. The sheriff, a big-bellied man with weathered eyes and a stiff knee, met them on the porch of his office. He didn't ask many questions. Elias gave him the names of the dead, the crimes they'd committed, and the charges that would hang around the neck of the one still breathing. Sheriff Tillman nodded, scratched his chin, and said only, "Good." Then he sent 2 deputies with a wagon to collect the bodies. He looked at Martha for a long time. "I'll have a doctor see to you," he offered. She shook her head. "What's broken can heal on its own. What's gone won't. Your cabin is gone. You've got kin anywhere." She lifted her chin, and in the golden hush of dusk, the breeze tugged gently at her hair. "Not anymore. Just a song in my head, and the land beneath my feet." Elias helped her down from the saddle, slow and careful. She held the guitar close, even now, its splintered body held together by her own stubborn resolve. The townsfolk gathered in quiet clumps, whispering. Some remembered her as James Kincaid's wife, the woman who once sang at harvest festivals and sewed flags for parades. Others only knew the rumors, that she was dead, that she'd burned, that she'd vanished singing into the canyon's belly. Now they stared as if a spirit had returned in flesh. Martha turned to Elias as the sheriff guided her gently inside. "You'll leave again," she said, "not a question. I always do. You going after more men like them? Only if they leave tracks like sins across the dirt." She nodded once. "Then take this." She pressed something into his palm, a strip of fabric torn from her old dress. The hem was singed and stained, but the stitching along one side remained. Initials in red thread, tiny and neat. "Remind yourself," she said. "That fire doesn't always win." Elias tucked the cloth inside his coat without a word. He didn't stay long. By nightfall, he was gone again, swallowed by the same horizon that had once spat him out, carrying a rifle and a half-healed past. The town returned to its routine, but not without a shift. Stories began, as they often did, quietly. They said she survived the fire because her soul burned hotter, that her voice stopped bullets, that the canyons echoed her song not out of memory, but out of warning. Martha refused to leave the land James had left her. She rebuilt, slowly. The townsfolk helped, though never out of pity, only out of a hush-filled awe. She took no charity, no sermons, only nails, lumber, and silence. And some nights, only some, she would walk to the canyon's edge and sit on the same stone where she once sang into the dark. There she would play, not always with words, sometimes only with sound, but the melody always told the truth. She never saw again, but she never needed to. What she lost in sight, she gained in clarity, and what she found in the canyon stayed with her, etched in the walls, echoed in wind, stitched into legend. Years later, travelers passing through would ask about the woman who rode out of smoke and fire with a broken guitar and a song that made killers tremble. Children would dare one another to climb the high ridge and listen at dusk, claiming they could still hear her voice if they were quiet enough. Some swore it was wind, others imagination. But those who knew her, who saw her stand in the sheriff's office, with dust on her face and justice in her spine, said otherwise. They said the canyon remembered her. Because legends don't rise from victory. They rise from ash.